I really can't think of a project we have designed at the studio without the help of SketchUp. When we begin every project, we use SketchUp as a starting point from which we extract our floor plans, crossed sections, elevations, and other important images. This course is ideal to understand and learn how to use these tools and apply them in real architecture. In this course, we will learn the process of modeling and 3D rendering from scratch and make the most of this software developed by Google and Trimble. We will discover how intuitive and straightforward it is and experience its fast learning curve. This, along with the ease with which we create our 3D renderings, makes SketchUp an essential tool for us, creators of space. Before starting, you need to have the program installed. If you don't, there's a link below with instructions in Lesson 0. Follow the instructions step by step, and let's get started. Now that we have downloaded the program, I would like you to double click on the icon, and this window will pop open in which you have the templates you can start from. We're going to go for meters because it's the most commonly used unit of measurement, but you can, well, for this course, stick to this one, but you can go for others. If for some reason this doesn't show, here in more templates, if you click, you'll see others and you'll probably find it. So we're going to go for plan view and meters. Great. So our interface opens and the first thing you see is these axes, but we're going to go to double click on this gray area and activate large tool set and standard. Okay, and well, this one I can leave here on the left, and this one I'll have it here. And apart from this, I am going to get rid of, double click here, I'm going to get rid of getting started. I just want this for now. Mac users, you won't have these icons here. Everything that you see here is found in File and Edit. You'll probably realize as the course advances that it's virtually the same Windows and Mac, but there are some differences that I will talk about, okay? Okay, so let's start with basic tools. If I click on the center in the wheel and I start hovering the mouse over the screen, I can rotate my design. Okay, so just by clicking and dragging, I can move around up, down, sideways to see whatever design or model or object I have on screen. Okay, so play around with that, and you probably realize that each axis is a different color. You've got the green one and the red one, which represent the floor, and the blue one represents the vertical axis. Okay, so it's 90 degrees with the floor. It comes in very handy because we're going to see loads of lines, loads of faces, and a lot of objects too, and you can get a bit confused. Okay, so we're going to start with the modeling tools, okay? And it's these ones over here. These are the modeling tools, and we're going to start with a line. Okay, so click on this pencil, which is line. So click here, and you can click wherever you like. There you go. And as I move around the place where I clicked, you will see that my line turns blue, green, red as I go around. That basically means that my line is parallel to each of these axes. It also is very useful for when you're doing lines and you've got a lot of drawing on the screen and you don't know exactly what you're doing. When you see this blue, green or red line, you know it's parallel. I can also change the length of the line. For example, I say 5, and now I know that this line is 5 meters long. So if I wanted to do a rectangle, I find the green line to make sure it's 90 degrees with my line, and I say, for example, 10, and another one 5, and the last one I can click on this anchor point, or I could say 10 again. So once I have a closed outline, okay, I have created what is called a face. Faces are very important in SketchUp, okay? So you're going to be using them all the time. Because, well, we're going to see now a couple of tools that we're going to be using faces with. When you click on it, you see this pattern. Okay, that means that it's selected. Okay, so imagine I click here the line and I don't close the face, I don't close the outline. I cannot work around with it, okay? Whereas with this closed outline, I can do a lot of things with it. You've got to take into account that some faces, well, all faces have like a front side and a back side. You'll soon see some examples. This would be the back side. It's a bit darker, as you can see, and this one is the front side. And now that you have an object, you can practice a bit more with the rotating of your mouse and zooming in and out using the wheel, which is something characteristic of these kinds of programs. So other important tools, the rectangle. You click on the icon and you can start and finish your rectangle wherever you want, but you can also type the dimensions of the rectangle. So I can type here, if you see bottom right corner, I can say 15 and then semicolon 25, for example, and I would have a rectangle, okay, which would create a face directly, okay. Now that we have defined a couple of objects, we can go for the pencil tool, and you'll see that we've got anchor points in the vertex of my rectangles and in the middle points. So this is going to enable me to create more faces. Okay, so I can use these anchor points to create more objects and hence more faces. Apart from drawing rectangles, I can do circles. Instead of the dimensions of the rectangle, I just type out the radius, let's say 15, and also polygons. So I can start wherever I want, any of these anchor points, or I can start, as I did, and also introduce the radius 6, for example, and there we go. And finally, you've got the 2-point arc, which is also quite easy to use. The first 2 points where you click are going to be where your arc is going to run through, and the third click basically determines, you know, the radius of your arc. Okay, so now that we have these, we're going to learn how to use editing tools. And the most important editing tool that, well, it's for creating models really, is this tool. Well, these are the ones we've seen. We're going to go on to these ones, and this one, push pull tool. Okay. Other programs call it Extrude, okay, which is basically creating a 3D model out of a 2D shape, okay. So if you click on it and you select a face, for example this one, I can drag this up to create a cylinder, okay. But I could let go, or I can maintain the left button clicked and just type out 20, and that will give me a cylinder of a height of 20 meters. I could do the same with this one. I click, drag, and say 15, for example. And so I have a cylinder of 20 and this building of 15. Okay, one of the great things about this tool in SketchUp is that I'm just going to do these randomly. I'm going to start extruding these volumes, but as I create volumes, new faces, as you can see, these are new faces, they are created, which is great in order to be creative and start designing your own spaces. For architecture is magnificent, because with a couple of lines you can start to design your spaces with these new faces that have been created. So I would love you to play around with this. Maybe draw some two-dimensional shapes and extrude them, and then start to design your own spaces from the new faces that are created automatically. In architecture studios, it's very useful because with just a very basic plan and a couple of volumes, you can start you know, come up with ideas just by doing what, you know, you can see I'm doing on the screen right now. Okay. Another interesting feature about the push-pull tool is the memory, trying to record the last time you extruded an element. Okay, so let's imagine I've got 5 rectangles I want to extrude, and I want them to have the same height. Okay, let's imagine I want it to be 20. So I extrude my first one and I say 20, and then just by double clicking on each of these faces, the program remembers, you know, the last time this tool was used and just applies the same measurement. As you can see, they all have the same height. It's great for pillars and anything, lots of things to do with construction and, well, buildings of the same height. You're going to be using it a lot. Walls in general. and it's going to save us a lot of time. Another very important feature of this tool is extruding with reference point. So I'm going to do another rectangle here, and let's imagine I know or I don't know the height of extrusion, but instead of calculating it, I just click on it, drag, and find a point that matches the height that I want this, shape, this object to be extruded. There we go. So in this case, I want it to be the height of the cylinder, and it will be as easy as that. Okay, so I could do the same with this one. I click and I find a point, This is very important. Two characteristics, two features of this tool. There's the double clicking, that remembers last time I extruded, and clicking, and before I let go, I drag my mouse to the point that I want the height to end. I'm just going to show you something really quickly. If I am going to flip this over here in reverse, as you can see, this face is darker. So I'm going to double click here, because I have flipped this face, it's extruded the other direction. So this has to do with what we saw at the very beginning, that all our faces have like a front and a back face. Okay, so it's something that you have to bear in mind in order, well, when it comes to using this tool. Okay. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to right click and reverse face again. So if I do it again, I'll have the effect that I want. I'm saying this because it can happen when spaces get complicated, that things don't go as you wish, and if you don't bear it in mind, you can get really confused. Anyway, if you're still a bit confused or you don't get the knack of things, don't worry, because we're going to do a couple of exercises now that, in which you will realize how easy, straightforward, and pleasant the experience of using this program is. Okay, so let's learn how to use Move. Okay, it's this icon here, 4 arrows pointing in opposite directions. And we can't learn how to use this tool without learning how to use selection, okay? To select. Select is a spacebar. It's like a quick command. So make sure you remember that. Spacebar is select. And there's a number of ways that you can select, okay? So first I'm going to look for a perspective. But it works similarly to other programs, okay? You can use a rectangle to select, and if you select from, for example here, from right to left, it will select everything that it touches, okay? What your rectangle touches, okay? So if it touches that rectangle downstairs, it will select it. But if you go from left to right, it only selects what your rectangle covers, okay? If you want to select the whole object, you can do one thing, which is to click once and the face is selected, double click and you select face and lines, and triple click, you will select the whole object. So when for example here, when your object is complicated and it's hard to select, you just triple click on it and everything that is connected to that volume will get selected. If I wanted to move this volume now, I would want everything, faces and lines in that volume to get selected. Okay, so I can also press Control after I've selected and keep triple clicking in each of these objects so that I add a selection to these objects. In Mac it's Shift. Okay, so I'm going to select this object, I click on Move, and so I can start moving from whatever point I like, this one for example, and I'm going to move my object. As you can see, just as in the pencil tool, we have this green, blue and red line, which is basically indicates that I'm moving this volume parallel to the red line, parallel to the green line, or parallel to the blue line, which is also very important to know. So I want to move it, let's imagine I want to move this 100 meters on this axis. So I keep it here, type 100, and that's good enough. Imagine I want vertical for 50 meters. There we go. Useful options to be considered with this tool is fixing the directions with which you move. Okay, so now I can move in every direction, but using the arrows on the keyboard. For example, I put this here and have it selected, and if I use the arrow that points up, what this is going to allow me to do is to make sure that wherever I move this object, it moves in this axis. Okay, and once I know that whatever the movement is going to be vertical, I can use a reference point to move it exactly as much as I want. So using the arrow, the arrow that points upwards would be corresponding, fixing it to the blue axis. Using the left arrow, I would fix it to the green axis, as you can see, and if I use the right arrow, it fixes my moving to the red axis. This is very useful for when you know that you want your object to be moved in a certain direction and you want to use a reference point, as I'm doing right now. So I want to align it here, and well, there we go. Okay, another interesting thing that this tool has is copying. Okay, so you select in the same way and you click, but if you press Control, you are copying whatever object you have selected and you're moving. So I can copy, and instead, as I was doing before, I was moving and I was typing how, the measurement that I wanted it to move. I could do the same now, but copying. So, for example, copy 50 meters, and So I can also copy it in the vertical axis. So select, move, control, upper arrow, and 50, for example. I could even use a reference point now. I don't have any references here, but maybe I could find a reference. So I'm copying with the upper arrow and using a reference point. Great, so now we're going to learn how to edit some of these prisms we have created. So let's edit one of these cubes, and we're just going to add things to it. I'm going to have it apart, and let's do a window with a rectangle, and I'm going to do a patio. Let's imagine this is a small house, and I'm going to extrude that. This would be the window, this would be the patio. Okay, this is a great thing about SketchUp. Once you have any volume, you can work using your pencil, using rectangles on the volume itself. So this is just lines now, but I've created a face in the cube and I can extrude this face. Okay, so we're going to start with tool of rotate. Okay, rotate is not as easy as the tools we have been using. Anyway, so rotate is this icon here, the two arrows pointing at each other in a circular motion. So you click on it. Well, first I'm going to select whatever I want to rotate. I'm going to do a triple click. Or I could use a rectangle to select. And the first thing that appears when you click on rotation is a protractor. As you can see, this one's blue because the angle of rotation is perpendicular to the blue axis. Okay, that's what basically this symbolizes. You can use your arrows and on the keyboard as we were using before to change the angle of rotation. Okay, green and red too. Okay, so if it's red, I'm going to be rotating it perpendicular to the red axis, and if it's green, perpendicular to the green axis. So the first thing you have to do when you rotate is to select a point of rotation. For example, this one. And now I have to think of a line. Well, it could be any line, it could be this one, or it could be this one. I'm going to go for this one because it's nice and easy to... Okay, so I can use, I can do it just by dragging, or I can, here where it says angle, where all the dimensions are typed, I can say 90 degrees or 45 degrees. I'm going to go with 45 degrees. And enter. Okay, so basically that's the rotation tool. As you can see now, the protractor is black. Why is that? Well, sometimes you may want to rotate objects, faces, lines in angles that are not perpendicular to our green, red and blue axis. Okay, so by default we're going to find, you know, the main axis with which we work, but if you get it close, as you can see here in the cylinder, to angles that are not these ones, it will find you know, it'll find that rotation point. Okay, and now with the blue, I take this one with the black, and it's going to rotate around this wall. Okay, around the wall I've selected. Okay, for now I'd stick to the red, blue and green axis, otherwise it can get really confusing, but when it's something that is not too complicated, it's more or less pretty straightforward. Okay, we're gonna carry on checking out tools, and we're gonna see this one, which is Follow Me. Follow Me is below push pull, and it basically does the same thing push pull does, but in a given direction. Okay, and for this I would like you to try to find an angle that is like an elevation. So you see how this works. Select the rectangle tool, and if I come over to this sort of elevation, as you can see, it automatically selects a red, you know, it's red, which means again that it's perpendicular to the red axis. Okay, if I turn 90 degrees and have my rectangle tool selected, it's going to be green. Okay, this basically indicates again that it's perpendicular or parallel to the red, perpendicular to the green, parallel to the red. Okay, if I do it from the other angle, the same would happen with the blue one. So I would like you to find the red rectangle, as I'm doing now. It's important to get used to these things because they will come up. So just draw your rectangle perpendicular to the red axis. Okay, and when I have it, using the pencil, I'm going to create whatever I want. Maybe a line here, another line here, vertical line, another line. If you want to do an arc, you can do an arc. This is to create a direction. And what the tool Follow Me is going to do, well, you're about to see. The first thing I have to do is select the direction, what I want to extrude. Then I click on Follow Me. And then I click on whatever I want to extrude. And it basically is followed the direction that I have created. This has been a rectangle, but if you want, you can change whatever, you know, the original object is. It could be a beam. Okay, and an IP. Same process. Select the circuit, if you want to call it like that. Okay, select the circuit. Then click on Follow Me. And then the surface or the face I want to extrude. This can come in very handy for a lot of things, for example installations, pipes or railings, but it will come up and we'll use it, and it's very important to consider, because if you want to extrude other things and you don't know it exists, it also saves up a lot of time. Okay, the next tool we are going to be learning is scale. Okay, and scale is essential in AutoCAD and in SketchUp, and it works really well. It's this icon. It's the brown square with the red arrow coming out, and it's basically useful for changing constantly all your volumes of things. I'm going to pick this volume, the one I created at the very beginning. I'm going to move it out of here so that you see how it works. And the first thing before you use scale is select. Remember, you can select using a rectangle, or you can triple click on your object, and afterwards you click here on scale, and when you click, you've got these, like this box. These boxes have 26 different like anchor points. Also, the one we use the most is this one, and this is proportional scaling. Okay, imagine I want it to be twice the size. I just type 2 and there you go. Imagine I want it to be 0.8 the size, so I just type out 0.8. Okay, other things I can do. I can change the height using this anchor point. Okay, so it's not only editing objects but also creating, because if you want to change things or move things around, it also comes in very handy. Okay, so I can use the same technique to change the height, so I can have twice as high or 4 times as high, and I just type out, or half the size, 0.5. Okay, so I can change the scale in other axes. For example, this horizontal axis, I'm changing the proportion. You can also make things fit to other spaces using this, and you can combine these anchor points too. Okay, you can use the other axis, and you can combine them. Okay, and these ones that are not as intuitive, these are basically intuitive, right? Okay, so play around with it. Maybe select other cubes in our drawing. But anyway, it's a very important tool. Okay, next tool we're going to see offset. Okay, offset creates lines and outlines that have the same distance from other lines. So I'm going to select this box, place it over here, and let's imagine I want, I'm going to have some windows, one window, another window, and another window, and here too. So I click on offset and I select the face. I want to create an offset of, so it's basically parallel to all the lines in the face, and I can type the distance to which I want these lines to be from the original face. So I'm going to say 0.1, and this would be, or could be, the frame for my window. So if I double click on the other faces, I'm going to get the same frame. Okay, so we have created a new face, and if I use my push-pull tool, I can extrude the frame, and I can do this, or I can double click to have the same, and I can push this further into the building. I can also select these rectangles and erase them, so I have now a window. Windows ready. So another way of going through this process would be clicking on the first window, deciding my offset, let's imagine 0.5, enter, and then doing my extrusion. Select the face, push. This is basically, I'm doing the same but like in a different order. How much? I'm going to put 1. So I can just say click offset, double click, and then push pull, double click here and double click here. So I would have the same result as before. I can also do a parapet wall. I select my face and, for example, 1, and I've created another wall around the building. Push, and there's my parapet wall. Okay. Well, these are the most elementary tools for creating and editing 3D models. Okay. We are now going to learn how to add materials and textures to our buildings. Okay. And this is actually a very simple way of doing it, which is with the bucket, paint bucket, and you've got a default tray here in materials. Okay, Mac users also have to click on the bucket. Okay, paint bucket. There is if the interface is different, and Windows users, you may not get this default tray at the very beginning, but if you click on Window, Default Tray, Show Tray, there it says Hide Tray, just to make sure it appears. Okay, and well, you can click here in the arrow and you'll see all the materials that you have. Metal, wood, it's not too many. Okay, these are the ones that the program brings. As I said, there's not too many, and we will provide you with a very complete library that comes with the course. And the materials are much more professional. Okay, but to learn, we are going to be using these ones now. okay, which are okay for practicing. Okay, so I'm going to select this one. For example, I'm going to select tile, and I'm going to choose one of these samples, and then directly I select the face that I want to color out. As you can see, that's the tile we have selected. Okay, you can change your material and change the face. Okay, if you want to go for woods, you look for the wood palette. Okay, and you start. So if you press Control before you actually do the click, you are going to color everything that is in contact with the face you've clicked on. Okay, and if you press on Shift, it's going to color out everything that you've previously colored, but with a new color. Okay, so as you can see here, well, that's what happens. Another important thing about the textures, materials and colors here for the paint bucket tool is the edit options. You are given this color wheel, okay, but I would change this option to the HSB, okay, because it's easier and I think there are more options, and for architecture we use it a lot. H stands for hue, so once you have colored something out, you can change this using this slider. Saturation, adding more gray. Normally if you don't want it to be too colorful, you find a color that you like and just add a bit of gray. And finally brightness, which is not something I use too much, but you can use as well. You can change also the scale of your texture. Okay, you've got a chain here which basically fixes the scale, but if you break the chain and change these numbers here, you can change the scale and therefore will change the texture itself. Okay, which is also quite cool to do. And finally, we've got the opacity. With this slider we can make things a bit more transparent. Okay, so anyway, so you've got all these options within the materials. Once you select a material, you've got a range of options, and apart from those options, okay, for example asphalt, I can change. Remember, you've got the Control button for painting everything, and Shift. I select this color now and I click on Shift, and it memorizes sort of the previous selection and it redraws everything. Okay, great. So now that we know how to create objects, edit objects and add textures to them, it's time to start doing the first exercise of the course, which will hopefully be easy for you. Okay, so for the first exercise of the course, I would like you to open this PDF file, okay, section, plan, SketchUp plan, sorry. As you can see, it is living space, a flat, an apartment. It's got all the necessary dimensions in it to know exactly how it looks like. And with all the tools we have just seen, it should be easy for you to create a model of this space from scratch using SketchUp. So I would suggest that you do it without my help. Try to create the model, and if you've got any doubts, you can go back to the video. Okay, so for the beginning, I'm going to start by drawing a plan. We've got 10, 10, 5, 5, and 5. It's an L shape, so it's pretty straightforward. And I'm going to use the references in my floor, the red and green references, to make sure they are 90 degrees with each other. 10 here again. Now find the red and 5. Find the green reference and 5 again, red reference, 5 again, and now I close the outline. Okay, so you probably think now it's time to extrude. What I'm going to do is I'm going to find my offset tool, but I have to find out how wide the wall is. Okay, because I want to extrude the wall directly, so I'm going to come here, and here if I know it's 5 and I know that this is 450, I know it's half a meter, so it's 25 centimeters each wall. So I'm going to click on offset, click on the wall, and I'm just going to type 0.25, and now I have two faces, the one corresponding to the wall and the one to the floor. The height is 280, so now I use the push tool and say 280, and now I've got a pretty good idea of what the volume looks like. And now what I have to do is go one by one, element by element. The window is 1 meter away from the floor and is 2 meters away from this corner and is 1 meter wide, so I'm going to use the pencil tool, and I'm just going to say 2 meters here, and a vertical line from the edge and 1 meter. And from this point I know I can draw my window. 1, 1, 1, and 1, or just close. Remember to use your references, blue, green, and red all the time, and I can get rid of this line. And now I'm going to use my extruding tool, okay, and I'm going to use the edge of the wall as a reference point so I don't overdo it. Okay, so I've got the first window. So I'm going to come back to the plan, and I see that the next window is 3 meters along, okay, at the same height. So it's going to be nice and easy. So I'm going to take the pencil again and find my red reference, okay, to the axis, and just type 3 and then do my window again. 1 with the blue vertical axis, 1 again, 1 again, and close the outline. I can get rid of this line, and now I have to extrude this volume. Okay, again, find the reference at the other side of the wall. You could say just 0.25 because you know what the width of the wall is, but you can use reference points too. Great. As you can see, this window is 6 meters wide and is 2 meters away from this corner. Okay, and it's also a meter away from the floor. So same process, 2 meters here, a vertical line, a meter away from the floor, and now, well, we've got this long 6 meter wide window, 1, 6, and I close. I'm going to erase this line, and I'm going again to extrude using the edge of the wall as a reference. Perfect. Okay, so let's start with a door. Okay, as you can see, it's pretty straightforward, nice and easy. It can get very complicated, but when you're dealing with straight angles, it's easy. Use these exercises to get familiar with the basic tools, you know, rotating, zooming in and out, finding the best perspective to work with. Okay, so we have the door here. The height of the door is 2 and it's 1 meter away from this other corner. So again, I'm going to use the pencil. It's 1 meter away, or 3 meters away from this one. Okay. Two meters, 1 meter, and 2 meters, and the same process as with the windows. So now we have our 3 windows and my door. And to finish off, we are going to add textures to this. So click on the bucket tool, and it works like any other painting software. I'm going to find wood here, and I'm going to use the bucket to fill it out, and maybe another texture, stone, for the outside. You can use whatever you like. The library that we have here in SketchUp is very basic, okay, and not very credible when it comes to, you know, these textures. Anyway, you decide how you want to finish this off. We use a completely different library with many more textures that are much better than these. But anyway, this is kind of cool because it works as other, maybe give it an interior painting here. This works like any other software. You just click on the bucket tool and start playing around. Okay, so once you have this, we are going to add furniture. The furniture that showed on our plan. There is a lesson on the SketchUp course dedicated to libraries. Okay, so I'm going to do something that you can't, because you probably haven't downloaded it yet. But I come here into the gray area and I click on Podium. Okay, but I have it here, Podium 2.5. Okay, this icon, and there's millions of things in this library. Okay, Okay, you've got to you'll learn how to do this in the lesson for libraries. Okay, so if you click on this icon, you see the number of textures and like models that you can use. So for example, for the furniture, I can click here in assemblies, and here we've got some dining tables, and I just click on this one, for example, and it's loading from the internet, as you can see, and I just decide where I want to have it placed. So once it's downloaded, you can add it directly to wherever you want in the project. So this is the table, and now I need like a sitting room area. So I come back to my window, and so for example, living room. Okay, and in living room, this is just so you see it, okay, but we will analyze in detail how to use these libraries, you know, and how to best utilize all these tools that SketchUp provides. So I'm going to click on this one, and it's the same process. It'll take some time to download, and once it's downloaded, I decide where I want to have it placed. Okay, it's ready to render basically. So it adds itself as a component. You can zoom in, check out my distances, click on it, maybe change whatever I want to change. I can scale it, change the size, and move it. I'm going to move it here up against the wall. Perfect. Okay, so you can decide what. So I'm going to click here again, and I'm going to do my windows now. I could go and, you know, design my windows, model my windows, but the variety and detail I have in this library is a much better option. So I'm going to download these ones, for example, nice and simple. Okay, so as you can see, probably doesn't fit, but I can scale it. I can scale it, you know, from the width and scale the height. Okay. Okay, so now that I have one properly scaled, I only have to copy. Click on move and control, and 3 meters away. As easy as that. So now I'm going to do this window. I'm going to click here, move. I'm going to find the reference point here. And now I'm going to click it here, so I'm going to rotate. And I have my protractor, but I have to find the proper angle of rotation. This will be it. Remember to use your arrows in the keyboard, and that will be it. Okay. Scale again, and I just fix it to the end. Okay. Okay, and now the door. Again, come here to hardware and construction, doors, and find the one you like. Any old door. This one is okay, and again, if it doesn't fit, it's no big deal. What I like doing is first I move it and place it in a point that I know is correct, and from then on I scale it to have it fit exactly where it should. There you go. So here we have, so in terms of size it doesn't fit because it's bigger. Scale, and down it goes. And I'm going to make it narrower. So there we have our door. Okay. And again, this everything to do with furniture we're going to see in another lesson, okay? But as you can see, it's pretty straightforward, quite easy, and SketchUp just provides the tools to make it, you know, a credible outcome. Okay, so we're going to get on and we're going to forget about modeling tools, and we're going to move on to talk about components. I don't know if you have ever selected something and this has happened to you. This, because you know everything sort of sticks together in SketchUp as you model things. Okay, this is a very characteristic mistake when we're modeling. It's not that it's a mistake, but it makes things very inefficient, okay? And what we do at the studio when we design spaces in SketchUp is that we create components, okay? For example, component chair, component table, component floor, component walls, okay? And we create a hierarchy for these components, which we will see in other lessons, okay? And it's very important to be organized and well structured with this, as it is with layers in AutoCAD, for example. And this avoids possible, you know, inefficiencies like the ones we've seen. So if we select all of it, the whole thing, and you right click, you can see here an option that says make component, and you can call it however you like. Unit, for example, or unit room, and create. Once you have created it, well, you've got your component and you can see the amount of things you can do with it. So for example, let's imagine I want to copy it. And I select the Move tool, and with Control, as you have already learned, if I click on Control, I can copy my component as many times as I want. Okay, so let's imagine that our client asks us to add a window to one of the walls, okay? I would have to add 4 windows. If I have created my components, in a coherent way, I could just double click on my component, and as you can see, the others have sort of blurred down. They're a bit lighter, a different color. That means that they are also the component that I've selected. So I could get on to modeling my window. I do my window here, and then I'm going to extrude again as I did before. And you have seen that because it is the same component, my action has been repeated in all the components. This is very useful because in construction things get repeated all the time. In pillars, in interior walls, so in many circumstances in construction, you are going to have to change things, and instead of changing it millions of times, okay. But sometimes, for whatever reason, one of the components is different to the others, okay. So what we can do is to select and right click, and it says here make unique. Once I make it unique, I can change it as much as I like without affecting the rest. It can happen, for example, if you've got the same component repeated and you reach the corner of the building, for example, and there's a window at the edge. So now I create my window here, and as you can see, it's only been created in this component. Okay. Okay, let's imagine that, so this component is made out of a lot of lines and faces, but you don't want it to be a component anymore. You want to explode it and work with these objects individually. So you select, right click, and explode. And you would have it as you did at the beginning. Just so you know, working like this without components is very, very difficult. Now that you don't have as many objects, well, it's not a big deal, but it can be very messy and difficult to understand. Another thing we can do is groups. What's a group? Well, I'm going to select my object. I'm going to make group, and I'm going to copy this. And the difference with component is that I've created a group, I've copied it, but if I modify this one, I edit this, I'm going to make this wall taller, okay? It only changes the one I'm changing. So it doesn't behave in the same way as component does. Component is more for repetition and changing, editing within that repetition. Groups are for, having together a certain number of objects in order to work more, quickly. Like 95% of the times we are going to be using components, as I said before, because in construction we're always going to repeat and change, and normally what we change is going to, we will want what we have copied to change with it, okay? So now we're going to learn how to measure, add dimensions and annotations to our drawings. It's these tools here. Okay, and this first one is as easy as measuring, okay? And quite easy to figure out. You click on a first point, and the second point it says 280. And from this point to this point it says 10 meters. And here it should say 10 meters, and it does. Measuring tool. I can also add dimensions in exactly the same way. From this point to this point we have 10 meters, and I can add these dimensions, in the angle, okay, in the axis I prefer. 280 for this one, 10 meters for this wall, or maybe vertical, as you prefer, okay? These tools are quite straightforward, really, but I'm just showing you so you know that they exist. I can also measure angles, okay? Here, the one that says protractor. If I click on it, you will see that we have the exact same symbol, okay, as the rotating. Don't get them mixed up, okay? Rotating, you rotate using an angle, and this one is just a protractor, which measures the angle. So I click on it, I select a point from which I want the angle to measure, and then I have to select another 2 points. So if I go for this one and this one, here at the bottom corner is going to say 90 degrees, okay? So you need 3 points to measure an angle, and the first one's going to be the vertex. Annotations, the one that says text, okay? You can add text to your models, okay? If you click on it, okay, it says A1 there, and I can maybe click here on the sitting room and just write sitting room or living room. And you have probably realized before, well, as you rotate, you can see that the text changes, which is very useful for clients, okay? So if I click here, you probably realized before, here it says 65.25 square meters, so it calculates your area directly. But if you don't want to add the area, you can just edit the text and write whatever you like. In this case, I'm going to leave it as it was, 65.25, calculates the area directly. So you can add a lot of information, dimensions, texts, notes, to wherever you want. Okay, you probably realized that our buildings and the green, red and blue axis are very related to each other, right? It would be very difficult to draw these buildings if the drawing were like this, okay? Normally when we draw with SketchUp, we use these axes. Okay, but it would be very difficult. Imagine I want to draw another one of these buildings here. I get this rectangle and it's not aligned to my buildings. The axes are not aligned to the building. There is a way of changing this in the tool that says axis, which basically helps you redraw where my axis is. So I start by clicking on a point, first the floor, the green one, the red one, and then my blue one, and I've redrawn my axis. And if I draw a rectangle now, it is with straight angles with my buildings. This is a very useful tool, and many times you'll see yourself changing these axes more than once, okay, because you've got volumes that change their angles and so forth. More important tools, okay. 3D text. 3D text, as its name indicates, is for writing texts in 3D. So for example, for facades, you want to indicate what the building is about, or maybe a pub, a restaurant, advertisements and so forth. So the first thing that appears is enter text, and I just want to indicate the name of the room. Let's imagine it's a hotel and you've got room 21, room 22 and so forth. So I'm going to say auditorium, for example. Or, well, I'm going to say room because it's what I said before, and I have rooms. I've got these editing tools here. Okay, I can change the font, I can change the format, I can even change how much it is extruded. But don't worry too much about it, because then you can change things. Okay. Okay, and then we have this. The good thing about this is that it finds the faces to, to align to, so it's easy. So it's a bit too big, but I can scale it using from the corner, and there we go. And once I have this, I can move it and situate it where I want, and I can double click and edit the text as if it were a model. Okay, so I can extrude, double click, all the things we've done. So you're not actually editing the text now, you are editing the text as a model. Okay, so now we're going to check viewing options, okay, which are the ones that are below the ones we have just seen. We've seen these zooming in and out and orbiting around using the mouse, but these options here that you can see do help us when it comes to finding the exact view. Okay, pan, the one that shows the hand. Pan helps us move our project sideways. Okay, like in the same plan. Let's imagine I want to see the door, and I just pan along until I get to the door. Okay, you can edit it and do whatever you like with it. Check out the difference between orbiting. Okay, I'm clicking on the center button of the mouse, and panning. Panning, sort of you move sideways. Okay, it's a very important tool. The rest are also very useful, but the pan tool we're going to be using a lot. Okay, then you've got zoom. Zoom is basically what your wheel does. Okay, your mouse wheel does. Zoom window, basically you just draw a window and it takes you to where you're zooming into. And then you've got zoom extent, and sometimes, well, you get lost in your viewing, you don't know where you are, and you just say zoom extents, and it shows you, or it gives you a clear picture of everything that you have in your model. Okay, and this one is called previous, and it's also very useful, especially when you're about to render. Let's imagine I want this image, I like it very much, and for whatever reason you change your view. You just click on previous and it takes you back to your previous view. Okay, it's also very useful. There is a lesson on infographies in which we will check out in more detail how this works, and we will be using this tool a lot. Okay, so you can go back as many times as you like. let's imagine that I want a view from a specific angle, okay, from a specific point in my project, in my building. So I click here in position camera, and I click wherever I want in my project. For example, from here, what would a person see from here? And now I can just see what a person would see. Okay. This tool is called look around, the one with the eye. First you position camera, then you look around. Well, just to have a feel of what your project is, or maybe if there are other things to edit, you can also change that. Let's imagine I want to situate camera here. Then I can edit the height of the eye. Okay, for example, 180 if I'm a tall person. And then I can start to look around, but then I can walk. You've got those footprints over there, and you can walk to experience exactly what your project, is about, like in real person. These tools are going to be used a lot, okay, along with this one, the panning tool, in further episodes of this course. Position camera. Okay, position camera. It's also, once you have like a final result, apart from the use it has. Let's imagine I want to edit those the furniture, and then I'm going to look around and edit something else. But when you are more or less finished and you want to make sure the thing looks as you want it to look, it's also very useful. Okay. Especially for interior spaces, if you want to, model all these, or edit the modeling of these, of the furniture or the windows or doors, these tools are really important. Okay. Okay, and then we've got this tool which we have seen, zoom extent, which along with these others is also quite important. You'll probably have seen me sometimes move things quite desperately when I'm trying to find a point of view, but that's because I wasn't using some of these. When I want to see the inside of a building and change what's inside, I'd go for that. Okay, and now we are going to learn how to use SketchUp in a workflow with other programs that you use in architecture. You can use SketchUp for, well, you can import into SketchUp, and you can export what you do in SketchUp to other programs. So I'm going to start by modeling a random 3D figure. Okay, so anything, just do whatever you like here. Maybe a cylinder here. Okay, let's imagine I've got this model and I want to export it to other programs. Okay, so I'm going to go to File and Export, and you've got two options: 3D model and 2D graphic. Okay, we're going to see both, but we're going to start with a 3D model, and if you click on it, okay, so if you click on it, you'll see the programs to which you can export it. And of course, well, you can imagine what 2D graphic is. A 2D graphic is going to be an image in 2 dimensions, right? Okay, we're going to start with the 3D model. So click here, and you've got this window, and it's quite easy to understand, but I'll teach you the basics. Okay, here you've got the type of file you can save it to, you can export it to. DWG is AutoCAD, of course, and we're going to be using that a lot. But you can go for 3D Max or Reno. Okay, that's Reno. Okay, I'm going to click on DWG, AutoCAD, and I'm going to click in Options, okay? Here, you've got whatever you want to export, okay? Try always to remember to export it to a previous version to the one you have, AutoCAD, and here you can decide what you want to export. You've got the edges, the faces, text, whatever it is you want to export. Decide. I'm going to leave it as it is, but it depends on what you prefer. Okay, so you click on OK, and you name the file. Let's say CAD 3, and export. It exports and it creates your file. Click on OK, and I'm going to look for my file. It's this one. Double click on it. Some people, some studios don't use SketchUp for modeling, so you would use, if you're working with a partner or you're working with a colleague that is not using SketchUp, this would be an ideal moment to export. Okay, so you open, and as you can see, it's the same model. Okay. Okay, we can apply this same workflow with AutoCAD. We can apply it, as I said before, here, 3D model with a 3D Max, if you prefer that program, or Reno, or Rhino. On the other hand, we can export it as a 2D graphic. Okay, 2D graphic, well, what its name indicates is an image. So you've got to be careful with the image you select, because it's going to select whatever you have on screen. So if I leave it as it is and export 2D graphic, again you have the options. You've got the well-known JPG, which is small, and you've got TIFF, TIFF, which is a very big image, and you can also export it to AutoCAD. I recommend you use JPG. If you prefer a larger or more quality file, you could use TIFF, TIFF, for whatever reason. If you want something intermediate, you can go for PNG. It's an okay quality. And if you want a vectorial, you want to maintain the vectors, okay, you can print it out, or you can export it with a PDF or EPS. Okay, EPS is for Illustrator, for example. It's very useful for presentation of projects too. Let's do a JPG, which is nice and easy. First, you name your file, JPG, 2D, and click on Options, and you've got other options here. The size you're going to have by default is normally going to be quite small, so I do recommend that you change the quality of the image, maybe 3000 here, and it's going to respect your proportions. Something between 3000 4000 is going to be a better quality, okay? It's also going to be a bigger file. Here, this is the line scale multiplier. This is for the line. If you want to find a line, I want to find a line 0.5 and export. And now you'll see that I'm going to have a JPG only of that view. And you probably can appreciate that, well, the lines are finer, okay, these lines, but as you can see, it's the same image. Let's imagine I want a TIFF. I would come again here to 2D graphic, TIFF. We go to options, and we have the same options. Okay, this anti-alias, you've got to keep it activated so it doesn't pixel. It's going to soften your edges, okay? So make sure it's clicked. And depending on whether you're doing it with Photoshop or not, you can have a transparent background or not. That's also up to you. Okay, and this is again a larger file, okay, a larger document. And here we would have the TIFF. It's a different quality, right? Different, better quality. And another way to export 2D, exporting the vector, exporting our vectors, okay, which would be with PDF, for example. Okay, so again, you name your file PDF 2D, and again in options, it's going to let us change the size of the image. But remember, because we are keeping our vectors, if I mean, regardless of what we do here, we're going to be able to edit, and we're not going to lose information. Okay. So if I created a very small image, I could make it bigger in Illustrator. Okay. Here, if we click here in Match Screen Display, we are going to keep the lines as we have left them. Okay. But if I unclick and change, I can edit the lines to the width I want. Remember that in Illustrator you can change the line weight too, so that wouldn't make much of a difference. You can show profiles, extend the edges, you know, what these say. I'm just going to click on OK, so you see, and that you realize that how important it is to keep your vectors, which is something that's also very helpful. Export, and I've created a PDF. This is my TIFF. This is not the one. This is a pixel, okay? And if I go to my PDF and I zoom, these are lines that I can use in Illustrator. I'll just show you very quickly. So I'm going to open Illustrator. And once it's open, you'll see how easy it is to. So I'm just going to drag my file into Illustrator, and as you can see, Illustrator is going to detect the lines and the fills of my drawing, of my original drawing. Again, this is very useful for project presentation, because you can model in SketchUp, export to Illustrator, and start doing and start using Illustrator, which is great for presenting projects. Okay, so that's it for now. And now I'm going to get rid of this. And what we're going to see now is how to import. Okay, so I find my SketchUp and I click here in import, and basically what SketchUp does is that it reads all of these formats from other programs. And now what we are going to be doing is we're going to be doing an exercise importing an image, a document from AutoCAD. Okay, but anyway, you've got all these options. So if you click here in AutoCAD, there are a number of options you can choose to go on. The first one is to merge the coplanar faces, so get together all the faces that are in the same plane. Then you have the option of orienting the faces consistently, which I'm going to tick. As you remember, you've got faces, two different faces, an A and a B, front and back, and if you want them consistently. Then you've got import materials, which I'm going to click if there were materials, and you've got the option of preserving drawing origin, and finally the scale. At the studio, we always try to work in meters with every program we have, and probably as architects, meters is the predominant scale used, but maybe in interior design other designers would like to work with centimeters. It depends, but yes, make sure you are consistent with these scales. You make sure that you know what scale you're working, because when you import and export there may be problems there. So now we're going to work with the workflow between SketchUp and AutoCAD in the second exercise. It's a very common way of working, and you basically can't use SketchUp properly without using AutoCAD. Okay, so we're going to start with the second exercise of this video, which consists of a workflow between AutoCAD and SketchUp. It's a very typical workflow. You're going to use it a lot. Once you learn, you're going to find a million opportunities in which you're going to find it handy. So this is like one of, a very basic example, and we're basically gonna use sections, elevations and plans from AutoCAD, and we're going to import it into SketchUp, and using those plans we're going to start the modeling of a building. So the building we have selected is the Barcelona Pavilion of Mies van der Rohe. You probably know it. It's the volume is quite interesting. So well, you've got some photographs and you've got the plans in case you don't know it, but we will help you along the way. Okay, so as you can see, well, you've got these images here. In case you don't remember, of course you can use Google as well. The easy thing about this is that all walls and glass walls too have the same height, so it's quite easy to configure once you have the plans. Anyway, so we've got two sections, this one and this one over here. We've got the main plan, we've got the rooftop plan. Okay, so we're going to go step by step along the process, and this very first step is very important, and it's basically cleaning our plans. This would be the end result. You can have a peek before you start if you want to, just to make sure you know more or less what the building looks like. You can also practice the rotating, zooming in and out, using your wheel and so forth. Okay. So the first thing to bear in mind for the part that corresponds to AutoCAD is that you must leave these plans very, very clean, okay? It's very important that no line that hasn't anything to do with architecture remains in this plan, okay? So the first thing we're going to try, we're just going to look at it very briefly and try to identify the layers that have lines that do not interest us. So for example, anything to do with dimensions, anything to do with these auxiliary lines, maybe furniture. If you're not interested in furniture, we're going to get rid of, okay? So here we have pillars, that's important. So I'm going to click on isolate layer. We click here, and for example, this is a dimension. We click again. Here in settings, if I say settings and off, we saw this in the AutoCAD video, and then enter, and basically what it does, it isolates the layer that I've selected. Okay, so I select all of them and I get rid of them. You can't just hide your layer, okay? If you hide the layer, SketchUp will identify the lines in the layer, so you actually have to erase the lines that you don't want, okay? Then you've got these lines that tell us where the section is. Again, erase. And then you've got this text. Text is also something we don't want to have in these plans. Isolate the layer. And off it goes. You can, if you like, go line by line. If you really know very well your project, or the project doesn't have a lot of lines or hatchings or whatever, you can go line by line. For example, now I've got 2 hatchings, the pool, which I'm going to get rid of. But what is recommended is that you get the knack of isolating your layers. You can learn more about that in the AutoCAD course, because normally no project is going to have so few lines, right? Anyway, as I said, I'm going to get rid of these hatchings. I just want lines. Okay, so now I think I only have architecture. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to save it, save as, and just so I know what I have, okay, I'm going to save it with the same name. This is just what we do here at the studio. You don't have to do it exactly the same, but I'm just going to say SKP for SketchUp, just so I know that it's in AutoCAD and it's ready to be imported into SketchUp or exported to SketchUp. And you've got to save it in a AutoCAD version that is previous to the one you have. I'm going to go for AutoCAD 2004, okay? Okay, any version that is prior to the one you're using is good. And save. And now step 2. Step 2, you open SketchUp here and import, and you have to find your document, the one we've just saved. I'm going to click on options before I accept and make sure that my unit of measurement is meters, because if you have if you change that, your proportions of things can go all over the place. Okay, import and go. Okay, you've got this very file for the ones that don't have AutoCAD. Okay, so you can start from here. It would be very recommendable that you do download AutoCAD or find an AutoCAD and do it, because it's very useful. And sometimes you think that you know very well how things work, but until you don't start to actually doing it, then you don't really learn. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is to explode this, because it has come as a unique object and we need to create our faces. Okay, so the first thing I've done is to explode it by selecting it all and right clicking and then finding explode. And as you can see, we have our lines now all separate. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to select the rectangle tool. I'm going to do a rectangle because I want to create my faces, because only with these faces will I be able to start modeling. Okay, as you can see, they must be coplanar, okay, with the plans. Okay, so all my lines are inside my rectangle. Once I have this, I'm going to right click and intersect faces with selection. So basically what it's done, it's intersected the faces I had with the big face I've just created, and well, it's not the total amount, the total number of faces I need. It hasn't created all of them. So I'm going to start with the pencil redrawing the faces, because it hasn't recognized absolutely all of them. So just a quick reminder, a rectangle, select all, and then intersect faces with selection. And it's not going to create absolutely every single face we need, but it's going to create somewhere between 60 and 70% of the faces that we're going to be using. After that, we use the pencil and we start closing outlines. Okay, you can check out what I'm doing, okay, but you will have to get used to identifying the outlines that are not closed in order to do it yourselves. Okay, if you think you're going to be doing this workflow a lot with your computers, there is a plugin that you can download which is 10 euros, and that basically does 100% of the faces. We do use it in the studio, and it's very useful, because this is a very quick way of both designing, presenting something decent to a client, getting to understand how your project is going to work. And I don't know if you've realized that we have a very thick line here. If you come over here to Edge Style, Profiles, and you click this, we're going to have a more subtle gray line, finer, which is, you know, easier for us to work with. Okay, View, Edge Style, Profiles. Okay, unless you are comfortable working the other way, I'd rather work like this. So what I'm going to be doing now is closing these outlines with my pencil. It's going to take a while. So remember, the first stage would be to clean the AutoCAD plan, make sure I only leave the architecture. Stage 2 would be to import into SketchUp my plans, and then I find a rectangle in the same plane where my plans are, and then intersect those planes. Once I have that, I'm going to close my outlines. You know, I'm going to close so I have all the faces I need using the pencil. Sometimes I may even use the rectangle. Okay, so I'd like you to check out that we have two sections here. A longitudinal section, this one, and it's related to the plan, okay, to the floor plan, and this transversal section, which is also related to the plan. This is going to help us in the modeling when it comes to the heights of what we push, you know, the surfaces that we push and pull. So the idea now would be to rotate these sections, okay, and have them vertical. Okay, so what I have to do is select it. So I find an angle, you know, that's going to make it easy to select. I select it, and then click and rotate. And this, I have this protractor here, and I don't want to rotate it on this direction. So I'm going to use my keyboard keys, the arrows in the keyboard, to rotate it in the direction that I want. I find a point. Okay, so I want to rotate it in this red axis. Okay, and then once I select, I can either use the mouse to turn. I can move it with the mouse, or I can type on my screen 90 degrees. I normally type 90 degrees just to make sure, because it goes 15 by 15. If you're working really quickly, you may get it wrong. Okay, now we're going to do this one. Again, I find an angle that's going to be easy for me to select the whole thing. Once it's selected, I click on rotate. I use the arrows in the keyboard. In this case, I find the green axis, this point, and a second point to rotate, and 90 degrees again. Classic mistake here would be to confuse this big podium with a roof. As you can see, this would be upside down, and we don't want it this way. But if you've done it this way, don't worry, select it again and flip. Okay, and you can flip whatever your selection is in the axis that you like, in the green, blue or red axis. Normally people get it wrong because they see that podium, the whole building is elevated on a podium. Here you go again, and they think it's a roof. Okay, so this is going to help us as reference points when we extrude our surfaces, our faces. Okay, so I'm going to select my extruding tool. I'm going to click on the first image I want to, well, object I want to extrude. I use the reference point. Okay, once I find it, I know that this has the exact height as it shows in the plan. So very easy. Okay, so now what we want to do is to have this plan on the podium. So I'm going to get my floor plan view. And I'm going to select the floor plan, and I'm going to move this. Okay, I'm not triple clicking as we learned in the first exercise, because there are things that are out of the object. So that's why I find the plan view, the floor plan view. So once you've selected it all, you click on move and find a reference point, this one for example. Okay, remember that you can fix your line of movement with the arrows of the keyboard. Now I've fixed it to the blue axis, and now I use this height as a reference point. So now I've elevated this floor plan to the height of the podium. This is probably one of the most difficult parts of the process, but you need to have under control these commands, using control, using shift, using the arrows, using the reference point, smoothly, fluidly, because you're going to be using it a lot, and it saves up a lot of time. As you can see, I've elevated it exactly to the height I wanted, and once you have this, I only have to slide my podium into where, and this is the easy bit. There we go. Great. So now I have my podium and my floor plan on the podium. This is probably the toughest bit, and now we're going to do the sweet bit. Okay, not sweet, basically it's, you see how it grows, you see how the building grows, how it gets created so easily. So the first thing we're going to do is the walls. Okay, we're going to extrude the walls. And I hope you remember from the first lessons of this video that if we extrude once and then double click, the program will remember, you know, how much I extruded my surface. Okay, so that's what we're going to do now with that's what we're going to be doing with the walls. Okay, because this building is nice and easy and everything has the same, you know, all the walls have the same height, it's going to be a very easy process. Okay, and remember that we have two faces, and we have to make sure that when we extrude, all the faces look up. Okay, remember you can flip your face if this happens. So first extrude, push and pull, we find this wall and a reference point here. Remember you can lock or fix the direction with the arrow. And now just by double clicking you find the faces that you want to push, and you just double click on this one, and little by little you start to generate your architecture. And here we have like the frames for some windows or glass panels that we have. Okay, these here, don't extrude these, because these ones, don't extrude them because they are a bench. Okay, double click here, double click, don't do the pillars. Okay, we are going to turn them into components, which is something that we're going to learn now, and it's also very useful. So something that is going to happen is that some of these frames SketchUp is not going to recognize. So what you have to do, in this case, if I click there, it recognizes the whole floor, so it's lifted the whole floor. To avoid this, you can do a rectangle to do like an extra face, and now you click and double click, as easy as that. This is probably going to happen to you in your file in the same way. Okay, sometimes if it doesn't, you know, if it doesn't get the line well, you can use the pencil too. Okay, so you can use the pencil in case the program doesn't recognize it with a rectangle. So now you're beginning to recognize the building, I suppose. So now we're going to do the glass walls, and we're just going to do them like in 2 dimensions, just with a rectangle. Okay, so this is for the glass walls or glass panels, okay, which I will then turn into glass using the materials provided by SketchUp. For this purpose, I don't need them. I'm going to erase this. Okay, it did a unique volume. Okay, this is the area where the shop is, and little by little we do our glass walls. Excellent. Don't worry about it looking this way for now. We will then add materials, okay? So let's start with these stairs. And here you will find a small trap. Sometimes AutoCAD doesn't recognize a corner. Maybe you're working in AutoCAD, and what you do, you import this into SketchUp, and SketchUp doesn't recognize that as a corner. Okay, so that's going to happen in these stairs. So again, use the rectangle to make sure that you close these outlines, and SketchUp recognizes them as extrudable surfaces. Okay, so there's your little trap for you. This is as easy as before, but the only thing is that you've got to deduct surface, basically. Okay, so I grab the first surface, and instead of pulling it up, I just push it down, and as you can see here, it's not recognizing this as a face. Okay, so I have to use my rectangle. Again, this is what's happening. Okay, the diagram I drew before. So you can either use the rectangle, normally it's going to be nice and easy, or the pencil. Okay, just to make sure that it recognizes all the corners and edges of your face. So you click, click and let go, click, click and let go, and now it detects my face. So, well, you can do it with, it's nice and easy to. What's difficult here is to find the view that matches both your 3D view and your section. Okay, that's something you also have to get used to. Once you have that, everything's nice and easy. There you go. You can see those lines there, okay, in the same plan, but we can get rid of those afterwards. Don't worry about that. There's a command that just erases all the lines in the same surface, but we'll do it at the end. Okay, so more things to do. Okay, so the bench, it has this structure. Okay, this is the height of our bench. So I just find that as a reference and I just double click because it will be the same height. Let's imagine you got it wrong, okay, and you selected this height. Don't worry, you can still edit your height and correct it. Okay, and now we're going to do like the board, where to sit. And there's a number of ways to do this, okay? Just the bench where people would sit down. I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to think about one possibility. There's millions of ways of doing it, and you probably think of one or two. I'll tell you what to do now. Okay, so maybe you've done your own rectangle and extruded it. Maybe I don't know what you've done. Maybe you've used this rectangle and extruded it. I'm going to use this one, okay? In this section, I'm going to get this face. I'm going to copy it using the Move tool and Control. Remember, if you press Control after Move, you are copying your object. I copy it here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the Push-Pull tool, and I'm just going to take it to the very edge of, the last one of these cubes that supports the board. Excellent. This is quite a quick way. You could have done your own rectangle and then extruded it using another reference point. Anyway, there's several ways of doing it. Okay, so let's start with the swimming pool. As you can see, it's not properly selected, right? It hasn't recognized very well, because you can see that the hatching isn't, it's not perfect. So again, I'm going to redraw it with a rectangle, and now it recognizes the pool, so I can use the extruding tool. I find where the pool starts and just take it down to where it is. And what's this next stage? The next stage, if you can see that line there, okay, that line is where the surface of the water is, okay? So I need to do a rectangle that is at that altitude, to express the level of the water. So I'm going to copy this rectangle. If I use the Move tool and using Control, okay, in the blue axis, okay, because I want it to be vertical. So if you click on Control, you're basically copying your rectangle. And now I need to use a reference. So my reference is that line I was talking to you about, which is this one. And there we go. Now I have that would be like the sheet of water. Great. Don't worry about materials yet, water, glass, and those things. SketchUp has plenty of resources. Next step is creating components for these pillars. Okay, how do we do this? First, I'm going to erase the lines inside of the pillar. Okay, as you can see, if I select from right to left, it selects the whole floor. So if I do it from left to right, I'm only going to select the pillar, and I'm going to click on Make Component, and the first thing is definition, and I'm just going to call it column. Okay, now I click on the face, and I'm just going to push it with this reference so it's the same height. Okay, so this is the first pillar I've created. And now with the Move tool and Control, I can copy this pillar, to where it should be. Move and Control for copying, and again Move and Control here. And now there's a trick. So I select 4 of them, and I click on Move, and again Control, because I want to copy all 4 of them, and I situate it where I want it to be. So there I have my grid of pillars. And I'm going to use this moment to teach you a quick trick with the command copy. Okay, I'm going to copy this pillar here on the floor, and let's imagine I know that I want the next pillar to be of a distance of 5 meters, so I type 5. But if I type X and then 10, what I'm going to create is a line of 10 elements, okay, copied at the same distance. So for architecture, you can imagine this is also very, very useful to copy elements, to copy pillars, walls, all sorts of things. Okay, so now that we have our pillars created, it's time to finish off with the roof. If you check out the roof, you will realize that there are a lot of projected lines, and well, you could have sorted this out on AutoCAD, but you can do it now. All of these elements are projections, and we don't want to extrude or create models out of this or anything. So what we're going to do is to erase them here. Again, you could have done it in AutoCAD. So I'm going to get rid of this. Is the swimming pool. So remember, if you don't know the building very well, you can check it out on Google. You can check out the photographs or the model we facilitate. These are the 2 rectangles that we are going to extrude. And I also have to eliminate this because this is like a gap on the slab. And what I'm going to do now is to select both and elevate them to the height from which they start. So I select them, and using the command Move. Okay, remember I'm going to use the arrows to lock the direction to which I move them. And now the reference, which would be, as you can see in the section, here. Okay, remember to use the arrows, because if you don't use the arrows, you would take it all over here. Okay, so but if you have your arrows fixed, you're going to move it in this axis. Great. And now with the push tool, I have to select, I select one, and now I just double click or use the reference. There we go. So now we know we have it at the exact height and properly extruded, and now we just have to take it over. I'm going to make a component, and you're gonna see why before I take it over to where it should be. And now move. And I can use the arrows again to make sure that it's in the same. And there we go. It's important to take a close look to the sections, because naively you could have just dropped it exactly in the corner of the building, but there we go. Okay. Great. So the building is virtually finished. Take a look to admire it. Oh, we haven't done this swimming pool, so I'm gonna give it the same depth as the other swimming pool. It's not recognizing the rectangle, so here and here. And now we can, same depth as the first pool. And if you remember well, I just select the rectangle or create a new one, and I move it to the same level as to the other one I had. There we go. Okay. So the only thing I have left now is to add materials. But before we do that, there is a number of things we have to do. Firstly, admire our creation, and I'm going to get rid of these lines, the sections. We don't need this anymore once the model is finished. We told you before about a command that was good to get rid of these lines. So if you select the whole thing and right click and find soften, smoothen edges, click on this and soften coplanar. What it's going to do is to get rid of all the lines that are in the same planes or plans, surfaces. Okay. So now if we go to styles and edit, what I can do is to have all the faces here in the second box here, not this one, this one. Okay, I can have front color and back color. You can decide on the color you have there. Back color is the faces we talked about previously. And now we can change the color here. Okay, and now it will be ready to to start adding materials. A good thing about having created components is that we can hide them and unhide them. Okay, so I select this one right click and hide, and now I've got the whole building to my site. Okay, that's a great advantage about working with components. Then I can unhide here the last one or all of them. Okay, how do we do the materials? So I'm gonna click on my bucket. I could just color things out. And just so you know, the materials that come here in SketchUp are not very good, okay? When I say not very good, are very basic and not very professional. The ones we provide throughout the course are much more professional. Okay, these are the ones we're going to be using. And there's a number of, well, there's many more alternatives, okay? When you have like an incomplete library, it's difficult to get to a result that you desire, and many times it's a bit frustrating because all the work you've put in ends up in something that is not, as you know, not what you wanted. Okay, but for practicing purposes, this is absolutely fine. So I'm going to click on materials here, and I'm going to go for glass. This one, transparent. And I'm just going to find the glass walls. Remember, select your component and right click and hide. And now I'm just going to look for the glass panels. Okay, and little by little we do the ones we know are glass. And then let's look for water for the pool, this one and this one. In edit, we can change the color, maybe for example a bit grayer, and I can change the scale of the pattern. So I can say 20, for example, that's far too big, but maybe 10, much better. And maybe even more gray. Okay, more things. Let's go for this one, these tiles. So remember, you can edit once you select your tile. You can edit the size of the tile. Okay, and remember that you can, if you select Control, you will color with the material selected on the entire surface, but if you select Shift, you are going to color out all the objects that have the same color. Okay, so if I want the whole pavilion to have the same material, I just have to click on Shift. Okay, so now the bench, I'm going to find a different material for the bench. Oops, not that. So this is now up to you. You can decide how you want the pavilion to be. Completely subjective. These are not the original materials. And to the pillars, we are going to give it a metallic finish. This one, for example. Maybe this one. I'm going to double click. So I select all of them. As you can see, I've selected all of them. Okay, if I paint one, I paint all 8 of them, as you can realize. So start adding your materials. Okay. It's very comfortable to use it. It's very easy. I don't recommend that you use the SketchUp ones, the ones that come by default. We have a very complete library. The ones that we use are just, much better for our designs. These are the ones that we would use. We will see them in future lessons, okay? For example, this one would be a material we would use in projects, okay? But don't worry, we'll see them in future lessons. Okay, so now we have to unhide our roof. Anyway, you can finish it as you like. You can add maybe wood to these frames, maybe sand to the floor, whatever you think is necessary. Just to finish and to give it a bit more credibility, there is a tool which is adding shadow. Adding shadow. Right click here and shadows. And on the box or here, this is to adjust these sliders here. But if you click on here on this cube, it just adds credibility to it. Okay, in case you want to hand it in like this, and you can use these sliders to change the angle. Okay. There will be another lesson in which we'll talk about this too. Controlling the light is very important. You can also add fog. Okay, here in our default tray, you have fog. If you don't find it, come over here to Window, Default Tray, and add fog. Click on fog and you'll have it here. So if you click on this box, display fog, you'll see it. This is just to add realism, right, to the project. So you can use these sliders again, depending on what your intention is, right? But just a bit of fog, again, adds realism. If you are a Mac user, you have it here in Window, okay? It'll appear here, fogs and shadows. And you can activate that if you like. Anyway, I hope you have enjoyed this first video of the SketchUp course. I hope you have learned, you more or less have an idea of how to deal with this workflow, AutoCAD and SketchUp. So just a quick reminder, first step is to clean up your plans in AutoCAD properly and just leave whatever is architectural, okay? Lines that have to do with architecture. Second step would be to export them or import them into SketchUp. Once you did that, we created our faces, intersecting, remember creating the rectangle and intersecting it with the other rectangles. And after we did that, we rotated our sections so that we could use the height as a reference. And after doing that, it was pretty straightforward, right? We just used the push tool to extrude our surfaces and get to create our volumes. We never used any dimensioning. We have never used the keyboard for entering measurements, which is it's very nice to work like that. This is how we work in the studio. We do the dimensioning in AutoCAD, and once we import into SketchUp, we just forget about dimensioning, which is a very pleasant way of working, actually. And anyway, so after we finished that, we just added the shadows and the fog, which is the last thing we've done. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed the video, and we'll see you in future lessons. Goodbye.